I believe that every one of us at one point in our lives have asked ourselves, why do we do the same thing over and over and expect to get a very different result? I am guilty of that. I've asked myself that question several times. But today we are going to explore some of the reasons why we all suffer from that malady. Take, for example, the classic case of people who may be on the lower strata of society, expecting that politicians or candidates who have never been in their position, who do not understand the pain that they feel, have never felt the pain that they feel, that these very people at the lower bottom of society expect that these people would be able to relate to their struggles? Now, I believe that is setting oneself up to expect that someone who has never been in your situation, has never experienced what you have experienced, for you to expect them to fully appreciate what you have gone through is just crazy. And we see that is very much the case a lot of the times with politicians who come to us to ask us to vote for them, who ask us to elect them. And we see it over and over and over that we elect those politicians who promise us so much, and then they get into office and fail to deliver. Not even close. But again, I believe. So what we end up doing is that we end up being hypnotized by politicians, being hoodwinked by politicians, and they are very good at manipulation. I have to hand it to them. And they manipulate the people for their own benefit, for their own edification. And when they get into office, a lot of the times, they are not shy about it, as we can see with this current administration. It is one thing to have manipulated people, and then you get into office, and then you're kind of sneaky about what you do. But it's an entirely different thing for you to actually flaunt your riches and your self-enrichment in front of the very people who elected you to get there. And at the same time, after they've broken their backs for you, you give them pennies on the dollar. And in some cases, you do not even give them pennies on the dollar. You withhold their salaries from them. All while you live a very lofty life. All while you live a very lofty life and drive around in expensive luxury vehicles. I believe that we set ourselves up because of three main reasons. First, we're hopeful. We're hoping that politicians who have deceived us are going to change. We're hoping that politicians who have not remotely experienced what we have experienced, that somehow, magically, they would be able to understand and show compassion and empathize with what we have been through. And the last point, I entirely blame on politicians and their cohorts. They're good at deception. They're good at deceiving and manipulating people into voting for them. So if you believe in the St. George Northeast that the mainstream politicians who are running as candidates would be able to change anything in your community, you are deluding yourself. If you believe that the mainstream politicians are going to be able to curb corporate greed, if you believe that they are going to be able to curb corporate greed that sacrifices the environment for profits, then you're wrong. And I'll tell you why politicians can't do that for you. Because these mainstream politicians are beholden to big money donors. So when they get into office, They don't represent your interests individually. They represent the interests of the big donors, the corporate donors, the business donors. You give and support with $10 and $15. You don't understand the power you have because you don't act collectively and you don't hold them responsible collectively. Individually, you try. Now, in many respects, your 10, your 15, and your $20 that you give to their campaigns collectively amount to more than individual donors. But yet still, when they get into office, they pay most attention to the big money donors. So don't expect that mainstream politicians, are going to curb people with farms in the Northeast who are dumping toxic waste into the streams and rivers of the Northeast. Don't expect them to do it. Do not set yourself up. But you should have taken a hint from their actions. Because all the mainstream politicians, none of them are talking about the toxic waste that is being dumped into the rivers of the St. George Northeast constituency. They wouldn't even touch it. They wouldn't even say anything. But guess who has the courage to say something? Someone that feels your pain. Someone that understands what you're going through. Someone who can relate to your struggles. And that someone is Nicholas Macmillan. He has felt the pain and the ills of society. He has been in the trenches. So that is someone who feels and who knows what you are going through. He can actually relate to your pain. But sadly, sometimes you would think that we would be rightly guided and support the people who understands and feels our pains, who actually been in situations like we have been in, who have felt hunger, who has felt thirst, who has felt pain, who has felt temptations, and has struggled like you have struggled. This is someone that you should want to get into office to represent you. Because that gentleman would have known what you have gone through. How would you expect that people who have not lived and experienced what you have gone through, how do you expect them to understand and feel your pain? Some of these mainstream politicians wouldn't even live next to you on your area. And even those that may live next to you are condescending towards you. And I'll give you a hint how you could notice their condescending actions. Look at the way they come around you and the way they dress, the dark shades, like some richy, posh. This is how they come around you. So in very subtle ways, they're making a statement to you that, hey, look, we are the playboys. We are the richy ones. And you should know your place. They don't even pretend. They don't even dress down. They come around you like playboys and star boys. Okay? It is a ritual of degradation. It is a ritual that says, look, you are beneath me socially. If George Brezan knew what these people have done or would have done to his party, my goodness. My goodness. But you know the sad part of it? Is that this gentleman, George Brezan, I'm sure, and I know personally, many of his wonderful children are here alive and seeing the destruction and decadence that has become the party that he foundationally helped to start. And I know in secret sometimes they shed a tear. I know in secret sometimes they lock their rooms and shed a tear to see what happened to the party that their father worked so hard to create. Now saga boys, pretty boys, wannabe richy boys are the ones that hold the reins of the NDC party. In bed and complicit with their socialist Marxist benefactors. So then how do you expect them to feel your pain? How do you expect them to represent your interests when they get into office? They don't know how. You know, Malcolm X in the 60s sort of tried to explain that disparity to us. And Malcolm X said that there are two types of Negroes. He said there's the field Negro and there's the house Negro. And he says the field Negro has an entirely different mentality and perspective than the house Negro. You see, the house Negro sits near to his masters. Malcolm even mimicked one time and said, when the boss or master says he's sick, what does the house Negro say? He said, boss, we sick? So he internalizes the feelings of his master. The field Negro now, because of his pain and suffering, he's the one that wants to stand up. Well, I want you to understand what that translates into in modern times. The field Negro is you, the voters. The house Negroes are the ones who are trying to get elected. These petty bourgeois politicians. And their masters, okay? And their masters, okay, are their big donors. And the people behind the scenes who actually pull the strings. They're benefactors, yeah. That is their masters. And they do the bidding of their masters because why? To enrich themselves. To self-enrich. So they don't get into government or use government to assist and help the people. That's not their aim. Their aim is to use government and the machinations of government for self-enrichment and to please their donors. And they all have become an intellectual petit bourgeois club of sorts who look out for each other. So you, the voter, you are surrounded. You don't stand a chance. Because first you have to realize what your struggle is. You keep electing people who do not feel your pain, who would never understand your pain, who do not really want to live or be around you, and only see you in a very condescending way. Only see you in a very utilitarian way. You only functions as people to praise, okay, to adore, and to give them adulation. That is why many a times they don't make themselves available to you. Why would they make themselves available to you when they can be busy drinking champagne, eating lofty dinners, and globetrotting? Why? And the slightest opportunity they get, they try to separate themselves from you. They try to move out of the neighborhoods that they grew up in. Now you may ask this question, how do I know that? Because I have seen it. I have experienced it. I have seen it even in my community, the Carnage Wharf community. There are people who our community have worked hard to educate. And then they turn around, and what do? It's like white flight in America. As soon as they get the slightest opportunity, they're out of the neighborhood. They don't want to live or be around you. They don't want to be reminded of their circumstances. So they move to all these wonderful residential areas because they want to be around Petit Bourgeois. They have arrived. They themselves have always wanted to be Petit Bourgeois. So they don't want to live around you. And then they come and expect you to vote for them in the town of St. George or in St. George's Northeast. I am talking about the Claudette Josephs. I am talking about people like your famous AG. She grew up on Park Lane. She understands or should understand, well, I know she understands, but she knows the struggle of people of that area. Cooper Hill, Park Lane area. The General Wharf area. But guess what? As soon as she got the opportunity, she bailed. She didn't take the time to use her elevation and come back to the neighborhood and try to elevate other young men and women. Show them the model that she used to elevate herself. They all talk about math and math problem. And oh, math is a problem in Grenada. Did she come back to the neighborhood and say, well, let me open up a learning center or math tutoring center? Or let me just use the existing T.A. Marshall complex to teach kids in the neighborhood in the evening math. She didn't do that. She doesn't want to be around you. But that is the woman who wants you to vote for her. There is the woman that is in a position. Her government is in power. So she is in a position to help revitalize the Carnage. To help revitalize the neighborhood. Because you would think one of your own will come and try to take care of you. But that is not the case. Especially if they feel that they have risen to some petit bourgeois level. They don't come back and invest in your neighborhoods. So how do you expect them to confront big businesses like in the Northeast? How do you expect them to confront big businesses that are destroying the environment? They can't say a word. But there is someone who said a word, who led by example, who called it out, and he is not even in office. And that is Nicholas McMillan. He made a video to bring awareness to what is happening to that river in the Northeast. So they won't help their neighborhoods. Claudette won't provide some sort of tutoring center at Marshall House. She wouldn't uplift the Carnage Wharf community. Ron wouldn't confront polluters in St. George Northeast. But guess what? Ron, Claudette, and their crew, the current administration, guess what they're obsessed with? Guess what they're obsessed with doing? And they're hell-bent on doing? They're hell-bent on lowering the age of consent of young boys and girls. That is their obsession. That is their obsession. Priorities, priorities, which will involve the wholesale selling out to globalists of Grenada's young men and women. I don't think you guys understand. This is their priority. But the young lion in St. George Northeast, Nicholas Macmillan, is the one that has the guts and courage to stand up to big corporate donors who are polluting and decimating the river in St. George Northeast. So we know who cares about you and cares about your community. Nicholas Macmillan of the Grenada Social Democratic Party, the GSDP. And that is why he knows you and you know him. He feels your pain and you have felt the pain that he has felt. So together, you guys are going to represent your community. He would be the one to represent you in Parliament.